Welcome to the Rum Revival. My name's Arminder, and today I want to talk about one of the newest releases from KoHana out on the island of Oahu in Hawaii. This is their newest Kea release from their 2023 Heirloom Collection. Now, in order to talk about this rum right here, you really need to first tell the story of KoHana and their efforts in growing sugarcane. But to really tell that story, you need to first tell the story of sugarcane in Hawaii. But really, if you're going to tell that story, you kind of have to first tell the story of sugarcane in general. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to start off fairly high level and work our way down until we get to this rum right here. Now, people often associate sugarcane with the Caribbean, but it's actually not native to there. Instead, the story of domesticated sugarcane and its origins are found in and around Southeast Asia and Papua New Guinea. Now, it's in those regions where different strains of wild sugarcane were domesticated between 8,000 to 6,000 BCE. From there, sugarcane took two different journeys, westward and eastward, or westward and eastward. I don't know. So let's start off with the westward journey. From Papua New Guinea and Southeast Asia, cultivated sugarcane migrated northwest to India around 1000 BCE. From there, it made its way to Persia by the 6th century, and then to Egypt by the 7th century, and then finally it reached Europe through Spain around the early 8th century. It wasn't until the 1400s that sugarcane started to make its way to the Americas. This, of course, was due to colonization efforts by European powers. It started with the Madeira and Canary Islands in the Atlantic, and then in 1493 it made its way to the Caribbean when Christopher Columbus brought sugarcane to what is now the Dominican Republic. This led to serious sugarcane production in the Caribbean towards the end of the 1500s, and that was the start of centuries of sugar plantations, estates, and sugar mills. Now, tied in with all of that was the need for labor to run those operations, which led to the horrific exploitation and displacement of Africans as part of the slave trade. And of course, a byproduct of processing all that sugar gives us molasses, and that ultimately gets us to rum being made in the Caribbean. Now, that westward journey is fairly familiar to a lot of people, but let's dive into the eastward journey of sugarcane. Now, cultivated sugarcane started journeying eastward out of Papua New Guinea around 1200 BCE as Oceanic and Polynesian people voyaged and settled the islands of the Pacific Ocean. So they traveled on the ocean from one island to the next on outrigger canoes. And on each journey, they brought with them crops that they could plant and grow to allow them to settle and live on those islands. Sugarcane was one of those crops, and it was transported as stem cuttings. It was found to be particularly hardy and could survive the long journey from island to island. Eventually, by the 10th century, Polynesians made their way to and settled the Hawaiian Islands, and as they did throughout Polynesia, they brought along a number of canoe plants, including sugarcane. So here's the thing, sugarcane arrived in Hawaii at least half a millennium before it arrived in the Caribbean. That kind of blew my mind when I first learned that. Once established as part of their agriculture, Hawaiians started developing new varieties of sugarcane that were specific to Hawaii, and sugarcane became an integral part of Hawaiian society. And sure, it was a food crop, but it was used in religious ceremonies, for medicinal purposes, its leaves were used for thatching, and it was even used for tattooing. What it wasn't used for was for making crystallized sugar. That didn't happen until Europeans arrived in Hawaii. And it wasn't until the 1830s when the first sugar plantation on Hawaii was built. And really it's from that time onwards that sugar played a massive role in shaping modern Hawaii. There was a need for labor to work the plantations, so there was an influx of immigrants from places like China, Japan, Korea, and the Philippines. That, of course, led to the current multicultural aspect of Hawaiian culture. The need for land to grow sugarcane and the need for water led to the displacement of people from their homes, as well as the erosion of the landscape and the cultural histories tied to it. And since there was a lot of money to be made in sugar, that also played a big part in the overthrow of the Hawaiian monarchy and Hawaii's eventual statehood. Sugar played a big part in pretty much all of that. Eventually, the sugar industry declined in Hawaii, and the last mill shuttered in 2016. And that brings us to KoHana. So back in 2009, the two founders of KoHana, Robert Dawson and Jason Brand, decided to start KoHana with a focus on growing and making rum from Hawaiian sugarcane. They wanted to particularly focus on those heirloom varietals that had a direct connection to those canes that came to Hawaii by canoe. Well, they quickly realized that that was going to be a bit of a challenge. So the sugar industry focused on growing hybrid varietals with much higher yields and that required much less attention while farming. That meant that the heirloom varietals almost faded to the background to make space for the more profitable varietals. So the KoHana team had to work with local agricultural scientists and ethnobotanists to look for and source as many heirloom varietals as they could find. Luckily, thanks to the effort of many botanists, many of the varietals had been preserved in botanical gardens. Ultimately, they found 34 different varietals that they started to grow on their farms. Then a couple years later, after they had grown some cane, they finally launched their rums. So KoHana's rum making is focused on showcasing individual sugarcane varietals in each of their rums. Now, a good example of this would be the standard Kea releases. Now, the Kea that is typically available is an unaged single sugarcane varietal release, meaning each bottle of Kea is made from only one of the 34 varietals that KoHana grows. Now, if you look on the side of the bottle here, it'll actually list which cane variety it is. In the case of this bottle, it is the Manuela cane. Now, to date, KoHana has made their single cane varietal Kea releases from 9 of the total 34 varietals that they grow. Now, the exception to this focus on single varietal rum releases is KoHana's Heirloom Collection. There, all 4 releases are a blend of all 34 cane varietals. Now, the Kea from that collection is their unaged expression of those 34 cane varietals. So let's finally talk about how this rum is made. So KoHana has an acre or 2 plot where they grow all 34 varietals on it. And annually that plot is harvested all at once. In the case of this release here, the harvest happened on November 2022. The cane is crushed, allowing for the juice inside to be extracted. Now, they're not fermenting and distilling all 34 varietals from this plot separately. Instead, the juice from all 34 varietals is mixed together and then fermented. Now, the fermentation that takes place is a closed fermentation that lasts 4 to 5 days with the use of a commercial yeast. One thing to note is that the juice is not heated or pasteurized prior to fermentation, so any bacteria or yeast that might be on the cane stalks may transfer over into the juice itself and could then become a part of fermentation, creating all sorts of delicious flavors. After fermentation, the wash is transferred and distilled on a hybrid pot and column still. Then the rum is rested in stainless steel for at least 90 days. Eventually, it's proofed down to 40% ABV for this release and then bottled up, and that is what we have right here. With all that detail out of the way, let's finally give this a taste. And since this is KoHana, they have these really cool glass tops or corks on their bottles, which are actually kind of a pain to actually open if you don't know how to do it, because if you try pulling it up, it actually doesn't want to open. All you have to really do is take your thumb on the side of the top and just push to the side. Boom, like that. Easy peasy. That smells so good. So I'm getting a little hint of stone fruit, a little bit of a vegetal note as well. It's like a vegetal, kind of slight tomato, but not like full on like something like a Paranubes, but just a soft, subtle vegetal note. Also, there is some salinity, a little bit of brininess that I'm getting on the nose as well. Like a little hint of like seawater. All right. So up front, I'm getting a lot of herbs, like fresh herbs, and like a little bit of peach skin. And those are like the primary notes that I'm getting. But then like midway through, the rum really dries out my mouth. Really kind of dries it up, but not for too long. At some point, maybe after a couple seconds, what pushes through that dryness is the sweetness of cane juice, of just like straight cane juice. And on the finish, as I'm letting it kind of linger, I'm getting like a soft hint of peach. So I really like what I'm tasting here. And what I like is that it's not just like green grass. Rarely in any of KoHana's rums have I gotten kind of like a generic, boring green grass note. There's always been some depth and nuance. So like, truth be told, I've always been meaning to, but I haven't yet done like a side-by-side tasting of some of the different single varietal Kea releases. And I say that because I'm really intrigued by the notion of seeing how different the canes taste, because here, blended together like this, it's not a jumbled up mess of 34 different flavors that are trying to like really vie for your attention. None of that. There are no like crazy sharp left or right turns here. It's coherent. And if you had told me that it was like a single varietal release, I'd believe you. Now, since this is 80 proof, most of the flavor kind of happens up front, where mid to late on the palate, it doesn't really have like a big lasting impact, which is kind of to be expected with a proof like that. Having tried this, I kind of regret not having also picked up the Kea from the Heirloom Collection. See, the Kea is the version that's been aged 4.5 years and bottled at cask strength. I didn't buy it because I really wanted to experience the 34 varietals of cane without any influence from the wood, but now I kind of want to see what the cask strength does with all those 34 varietals. What I'd love to see in the future is this 34 cane blend at 100 proof. Just putting that out there. I think what we really need to do to get a proper sense of this rum is to give it a go both in a daiquiri and a tea punch. Luckily, I happen to have both right here. Let's start off with the daiquiri. That's so good. What does that taste like? Honestly, what it kind of tastes like is mashed banana puree. Yeah, which is really just a fancy way of saying that it kind of tastes like banana baby food. And I mean that like in the nicest way possible. I'm also getting a lot of the taste of cane juice, which if you've never really drunk cane juice before, I highly recommend it. Besides just being tasty, it's a flavor note that I think you should experience because it comes up a lot in cane juice rums, which is obviously kind of like a no-brainer, and it might feel kind of basic to say like, hey, this cane juice rum tastes like cane juice, but in a lot of cases, I don't know of a better way of describing the flavor. All right, so let's move on to the tea punch. So here I'm getting some of those herbs that I was getting, but it almost, in combination with the lime and the cane syrup, it is almost reminiscent of like a note of like mint, like a spearmint. Not like super minty, but maybe some more of the vegetal aspects of like chewing on a leaf of spearmint. Honestly, a little bit of basil as well. It's this twin note of spearmint and basil kind of playing hand in hand together in this tea punch. That is a super unique note that I don't know if I've gotten much in any tea punches or cane juice rums for that matter. That's cool. So I think this rum really kind of shines in these cocktails with the additions of the cane syrup and the lime. The rum here really blossoms and reveals so many different layers than just drinking it straight. Like I wasn't getting the note of banana when drinking this straight. I wasn't getting the note of like spearmint and basil when I was drinking this straight. So that's really, really cool. Well, there you go. That is my video on Hawaiian sugarcane on KoHana and their 2023 Heirloom Collection Kea release. Let me know in the comments below if you've been to KoHana. I want to know how your experience was. Did you sample the fresh pressed cane juice? Did you sample through their rums? Did you have one that was a particular favorite? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching. Catch you next time. Cheers.